The ocean had retreated farther than any of us could ever remember, peeling back its silvery blanket to expose a vast, jagged labyrinth of black volcanic rock and steaming, shallow pools that mirrored the fierce afternoon sun. What had been open, rolling sea only hours earlier was now an alien landscape alive with scurrying shadows, where tiny silver-scaled fish darted frantically through narrow fissures, and dark hermit crabs clattered across the wet basalt, greedily clinging to the stolen shells they claimed as their nomadic homes. Strange brittle stars rested in the damp crevices with their spindly, fragile tentacles outstretched into the warmth, though we paid them little mind. There were simply too many wonders competing for our attention. Every few minutes, a voice would echo across the flats as someone shouted for the rest of us to come look at a strange conch or a vibrant reef fish stranded by the rapid ebb. Personally, I was scouring the sand for a pristine nautilus shell, convinced that if I looked hard enough, I could find a genuine ocean treasure before the tide reclaimed the shore. Imagine getting stranded out here. Noah laughed, playfully plunging a driftwood stick into a deep pool and kicking up an underwater sandstorm that swallowed a tiny, frog-faced bottom dweller. As the swirls of grit settled, the strange little fish reappeared, standing motionless against the gray stone in a brilliant display of natural camouflage. Noah leaned on his stick, wiping sweat from his forehead as he joked that if he were shipwrecked, he would build a sprawling civilization with the crabs. Maya, his younger sister, didn't miss a beat, replying smoothly that he would inevitably lose a war to the crustaceans because they possessed far more organizational skills than he did. Laughter bounced warmly across the damp rocks, fading only when it met the heavy rhythmic rumble of the distant surf. Farther ahead, kneeling near the edge of a narrow volcanic ridge, our neighborhood friend Eli crouched with his posture rigid and intent, calling out to us with a sudden sharpness that cut through our banter. At first, none of us bothered to look up, having grown exhausted by Eli's dramatic false alarms earlier in the afternoon, especially after he had convinced me to inspect what he claimed was a prized chunk of ambergris, only for it to be a squishy, uninspiring sea cucumber. But when Eli shouted again, his voice lacked its usual teasing lilt, vibrating instead with a genuine, breathless awe that forced Maya to drop her handful of sea glass and hurry over. One by one, we scrambled across the slippery stones and gathered around Eli, peering over his sunburned shoulders into a shadowy, emerald-lit crevice beneath a flat shelf of rock. Resting on a bed of crushed shells was a damp, tan-colored blob no larger than a golf ball, seemingly unremarkable until it began to shift and unfurl. A tiny octopus stretched itself awake with surprising hypnotic elegance, extending one delicate arm at a time as a faint, pearlescent shimmer rippled across the circular grooves of its skin. Maya breathed a soft whisper of disbelief, stepping closer as Noah leaned over her shoulder to marvel at how small and fragile the creature looked, immediately guessing it was a newborn. Eli smiled, his eyes reflected in the glassy surface of the pool as he whispered that it was the most adorable thing he had ever seen, watching fascinated as the octopus slowly climbed onto the exposed rock, its soft mantle changing texture from smooth to pebbled in an instant. It showed no signs of fear, using its slender, curious appendages to explore the surrounding pebbles and broken shells with deliberate grace. When Noah asked if we could touch it, hesitation hung in the salty air. While none of us recognized the species, an instinctive squeamishness about touching marine wildlife kept us back, until Eli slowly lowered his index finger toward the stone. The tiny creature raised a single sucker-lined tentacle, wrapping it gently around Eli's bare fingertip for a brief, weightless second before releasing him, prompting Noah to laugh and declare that the wild animal clearly fancied him. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the coastal sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, we lingered around the pool, captivated by the creature's immense, intelligent eyes as it explored Eli's hand. When Eli asked if octopuses made good pets, a familiar, good-natured argument broke out between Noah and Maya over marine biology documentaries and the biological differences between squids and octopuses. Amid the chatter, the dying sunlight caught the creature's skin at a new angle, revealing a breathtaking, brilliant display. Brilliant electric blue rings suddenly flashed across its yellow-brown body, glowing like neon circuitry for a vivid second before fading back into the dull camouflage of the rock. Eli let out a soft gasp, chuckling that the octopus was giving him tickling, painless little nibbles along his cuticle, which Noah confidently dismissed as standard cephalopod behavior. Yet, while the rest of us laughed at Noah's theory that we were interrupting the creature's evening routine, Eli's posture stiffened, his voice growing unusually tight and urgent as he insisted that he needed to take the animal home to save it from the incoming tide. We immediately chorused our disapproval, but Eli's eyes had grown strangely wide and fixated, a subtle restlessness creeping into his movements as he argued that the creature was trying to communicate with him. Despite Maya rolling her eyes and reminding him that the ocean was its natural habitat, Eli abruptly stood up, declaring that he would scan the beach debris for an empty bottle or bucket to build a makeshift aquarium. Before we could reason with him, he scrambled over a high ridge of black basalt and vanished into the shadows of the dunes, leaving us to wonder why he was suddenly acting with such erratic, frantic urgency. Noah shouted after him to hurry as the daylight dwindled, catching a quick thumbs up from Eli over the crest of the rock before turning his attention back to the shoreline, where the turn of the tide was beginning to send thin, frothy fingers of water creeping back into the dry channels. We spent several minutes tracking a transparent shrimp in a nearby basin, completely losing track of time until the growing chill in the wind made Maya stop and frown toward the empty, darkening dunes. Checking his phone, Noah announced with a hint of unease that 20 minutes had passed without a sign of Eli, prompting Maya to call out her friend's name into the gathering twilight. Only the booming, aggressive roar of the returning surf answered her, the ocean steadily reclaiming the territory it had abandoned hours ago. Panic creeping into our chests, the three of us scrambled over the jagged ridge, our voices rising in pitch and urgency as we crested each formation without finding a single footprint in the wet sand or any sign of our friend. Behind us, the foaming waves surged over the lower rocks, violently drowning the tranquil little pool where we had encountered the shimmering creature, transforming the playground back into a hostile, churning sea. By the time darkness had fully engulfed the coastline, the sweeping beams of heavy flashlights cut through the sea spray as emergency park rangers and paramedics joined our desperate search along the pitch-black shore. Shivering violently beneath a thick wool blanket, Maya sat on the tailgate of a ranger vehicle, struggling to describe the exact layout of the isolated tide pools to a seasoned officer whose pen moved rapidly across his notepad. When she mentioned the tiny brown octopus, the ranger paused, but it was my quiet addition about the creature's glowing electric blue circles that caused the man's expression to instantly harden into a mask of pure dread. When Maya whispered how brilliantly the rings had illuminated, a chilling silence descended over the rescue team. The ranger slowly closed his notebook, his voice dropping to a grave whisper as he asked precisely how much contact Eli had made with the animal. A wave of cold, suffocating terror washed over Noah as he recalled Eli's smile, the gentle wrap of that small arm around his finger, and his own casual joke about the animal liking him, none of us realizing that the painless, tickling nibbles were actually the delivery of tetrodotoxin, a neurotoxin thousands of times more potent than cyanide. Shouts erupted from the lower shoreline where the rangers' tactical lights converged on a narrow, partially submerged crevice just above the crashing breakers. We raced toward the commotion, freezing in horror as the paramedics knelt over Eli, who was slumped against the damp stone with the rising tide already lapping at his boots. He was entirely paralyzed, trapped inside his own motionless body by the toxin, unable to lift a finger or draw a breath on his own, yet his wide, luminous eyes flickered with intense, conscious terror as the flashlights found his face. Moving with practiced, explosive speed, the medical team hoisted him out of the reach of the hungry waves, immediately securing an emergency bag valve mask over his mouth to force oxygen into his failing lungs as they rushed him toward the waiting ambulance. Watching the flashing red and blue lights disappear into the night, we were left with the profound, sobering realization that nature often cloaks its most formidable defenses in breathtaking elegance, and that true respect for the wild demands we admire its beauty from a safe, untouchable distance.